I've been using the Samsung Galaxy Book 12 as my primary computing device ever since I first got it in October 2017. 1 year later, here's how it holds up. The absolute first thing I have to mention is the price, because that's what practically everyone has been commenting about on my unboxing video. Even though it's been out for almost 2 years now, the Galaxy Book is still an expensive device. The model I've got, which has 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage, retails for $1,900 on the Samsung Canada website. For reference, a similarly spec'd Microsoft Surface Pro with the type cover and Surface Pen can be had for $1,950, so the Galaxy Book is just a tiny bit cheaper. The tablet itself has top-notch build quality, being made primarily out of metal and glass, with rounded edges and an overall really slim profile. Weighing 754 grams, it's light enough to comfortably carry around in your bag all day, but just a bit too heavy to hold in your hand for extended periods of time. Along the top, you've got the fan vent, the 2 microphones, and the volume rocker and power button, both of which are as clicky and responsive as the day I bought the tablet. Along the right side, you've got 1 speaker, 2 USB-C ports, and the headphone jack. On the left side, you've got the other speaker and the microSD card slot, which supports cards up to 256 gigabytes. At the bottom are your pogo pins to connect this to the keyboard cover magnetically. And at the back you've got that 13 megapixel camera along with the shiny Samsung logo. Lastly, at the front you've got the 5 megapixel camera, the LED indicator, the ambient light sensor, and of course that beautiful 12-inch Super AMOLED display. While I generally like the build quality and design of the Galaxy Book, there are a few points that I need to talk about. First off, the USB ports. I love that I can charge the tablet using a regular USB-C cable. My phone charges the same way, so it's just one less thing I need to pack. Plus, I can charge the tablet through a power bank, which is really useful when I'm on the go. But at the same time, most people, myself included, still use normal USBs. It would have been much better if Samsung had included a full-size USB port on this tablet like you get with the Microsoft Surface. At the very least, Samsung could have provided a USB-C to regular USB adapter in the box. I had to go out and buy this one, just so I could connect my regular accessories to the Galaxy Book. On the plus side, the USB-C ports provide enough juice to power most external accessories like microphones or hard disks, and one of them can even be used to power an external 4K display. You can use either USB port to charge the tablet. The dual speaker setup on the Galaxy Book is actually pretty great. The speakers are loud enough that I don't regret not having front-facing speakers, and they also produce clear audio with no distortion, even at the highest volume level. There's not much going on in terms of bass, but that's to be expected. I also like the speaker placement here because I've never accidentally covered up the speakers while holding the tablet. Speaking of which, if you're doing graphically intensive work, you'd best keep your hands away from the top right side of the tablet. It gets uncomfortably hot. The fan, which is usually silent, starts going absolutely mental. This doesn't happen very often, but it has happened enough times that I felt it was worth pointing out. Thankfully, the rest of the tablet remains perfectly cool no matter what you're doing. Moving around to the back, I was actually really impressed with the camera, which is not something I thought I'd ever say about a tablet. It's not smartphone good, but it is smartphone from 2015 good, which is actually great for a tablet. You've got a very basic camera interface to work with, but you can mess around with some of the manual settings to get a great photo. You can also record 1080p videos at 30 frames per second, and the footage looks relatively clean, and it's fairly smooth thanks to some software stabilization. Now, a lot of people will tell you that you should never ever take a picture using a tablet, but those people are just talking rubbish. The camera here is particularly useful for students. You can take a picture of the whiteboard or a class handout or even your own notes if your handwriting is neat enough, and then use software to convert that image to text that you can edit. The optical character recognition isn't always correct, but when it messes up you can just use your SPen to make notes directly on the picture you took, so it's not a complete waste of time. The camera is definitely an underrated feature of the Galaxy Book 12, and one that I feel people tend to overlook simply because it is a tablet camera. The camera on the front, though, is nothing to write home about. It's okay for Skype calls, but that's about all it's good for. There's no Windows Hello option here, so you can't unlock the tablet with your face. The ambient light sensor right next to the camera is a bit slow to register when it gets dark, and it can also be a bit haphazard when changing the screen brightness. I feel like it just fluctuates between brightness levels at random. In fact, it's just quicker to adjust brightness myself using the toggle in the sidebar. While I appreciate having an LED charging light on the tablet, having it right next to the camera and making it red feels like a really weird design choice considering all the privacy issues we've had. The LED indicator starts flashing when the tablet is booting up or shutting down, and it also turns on when either camera is being used. Aside from that, there's really not much to say about it. As for the screen, I have absolutely no complaints about it. It's big, it's bright, it's vibrant, it supports HDR content, and it just looks amazing. Even after a year, I'm still impressed with how rich the colors and how deep the blacks are when I turn the screen on. It can handle direct sunlight about as well as a smartphone screen, so you might want to avoid sitting in places where the sun's behind you. For those of you worrying about the longevity of this display, what with it being an AMOLED screen, that's definitely a valid worry. Sadly, there's really no way to know if your device will experience screen burn-in. To be on the safe side, I have set my taskbar to auto-hide so it's not permanently on screen, and my desktop background changes regularly. I'm not sure if that makes any difference whatsoever, but I can tell you that I have not noticed any screen burn-in issues yet. So, with the hardware done, let's take a look at the accessories before we get to how this tablet actually fares in day-to-day use. You've got the keyboard folio case that attaches magnetically to the tablet, and of course you've got the SPen which just slides into the little holder on the left side. Both of these accessories never need to be charged or paired with the tablet, they just work straight out of the box, which is super convenient. We'll start off with the keyboard case. A lot of people have been calling it flimsy or cheap, but I think it's pretty sturdy considering how thin it is. It does have a bit of flex to it, but if you use this on a table you'll hardly notice. The cover is made of a soft touch plastic which picks up a lot of dust and fingerprints by the way, and it wraps around the entire tablet kind of like a taco or hot dog. It can be folded a bunch of different ways, and I'm not going to go through all of them here, but you can check out my other video to learn more about that. The keyboard is excellent. The keys are big and well spaced, they have a surprising amount of depth and travel considering how thin the case is, and they're also really responsive. Each key bounces back as soon as I lift my finger, which provides excellent tactile feedback. The keys are also not completely flat, but they're very slightly concave, which makes for a fantastic typing experience. In terms of the actual layout, I found myself pressing the backslash key whenever I went to press enter because of how the enter key is shaped. The left shift key is also pretty squished because there's another backslash key right next to it, but these are just minor quibbles, and after a while I was typing as quickly on the Galaxy Book keyboard as I do on my regular computer. The keyboard is also backlit and has 3 levels of brightness, or 4 if you think off counts as a level. The backlight is great, it doesn't flicker, it doesn't leak, and it lights up the whole keyboard evenly. Each letter is clearly visible, even at the lowest brightness setting. However, there is a design flaw here. Only the text written in white lights up. So the function key, the function controls at the top, and the text on the arrow keys, they're all written in blue/grey, so they don't actually light up with the rest of the keyboard. That means that if you're typing in the dark, you kind of need to remember which button does what. For what it's worth, the red symbols on the keyboard also don't light up, but I've never used them, so it's not really an issue for me. But if we go back to the function keys, you've got a whole bunch of different controls here. My only issue is that a few of them seem useless. For example, you've got 2 keys to turn the volume up and down, which you could just do by using the tablet's physical buttons. There's also a key to open up task view, which you could just do by swiping in from the left on your tablet. Instead of these, I would have preferred maybe some media controls or a quick way to trigger air command if I want to capture something on screen and don't feel like taking the SPen out of its holder. Just below the keyboard is a trackpad, which is also great. It's big enough to easily do multi-finger gestures like swiping between desktops or applications, and is very sensitive to touch input. I actually found the default setting a bit too sensitive, so I dialed it down a notch in the settings. Much like the keyboard, the trackpad has a decent amount of depth when you press down in the bottom corners, and it gives off a reassuring click when you do. You may be wondering why that little NFC sticker is there, since the tablet doesn't have NFC. And the reason for that is Samsung Flow, an application only available on select Samsung devices. What it does is it basically creates a connection between your phone and your tablet, and you can use this connection to send files between devices, have your phone notifications show up on the tablet, and more importantly, unlock your tablet using your phone's fingerprint sensor. I don't have a Samsung phone, so I wasn't actually able to try this feature out, and obviously I can't really comment on how well it works. But I can say that I think it's a pretty clever solution to add some extra security to the Galaxy Book, since it doesn't support Windows Hello like the Microsoft Surface, and it doesn't have a fingerprint reader like the iPad Pro. One area where the keyboard falls short is when you're typing on your lap. With the traditional laptop, all the weight is at the base of the device, so you can tilt your screen back as far as you want without worrying about the laptop toppling over. With the Galaxy Book, all that weight is in the tablet. If you move the screen too far back while it's balancing precariously on your lap, it will fall over, and the keyboard magnets offer no support when that happens. And if you listen really closely when the tablet hits the ground, you can actually hear your wallet crying. Now, the folding design of the case exacerbates this problem because it's just so ridiculously long. My hands are practically resting on my stomach when I'm typing because I worry that if I push it any further, the tablet might fall backwards. That length means that it also has a problem with airplane trays and those stupidly small university desks. Now let's talk about the SPen. It's about the same size and shape as a standard pen, and it weighs roughly the same as well. It's mainly made out of the same soft touch plastic as the keyboard, apart from the nib and the metal clip. It's got a single button which sits flush with the rest of the body, but it's fairly clicky. The button placement is great. It's not too low that you'd accidentally press it when using the pen, but it's not so high that it's out of reach. I'm not too fond of the squircle design, which is apparently a word we use now. That slightly squarish design means that the SPen lies flat when the keyboard is on a table, and that, paired with the SPen soft touch plastic, means that getting the SPen in and out of its little holder is annoying. On the plus side, because of that metal clip I mentioned earlier, you can magnetically attach the SPen to the tablet. It latches on to the same spot the keyboard snaps onto on either side, and it's not super secure since it just dangles there, but it makes for easier access than having to pull it out of the keyboard attachment every time you need to use it. I think a more circular design like the Apple Pencil or Surface Pen would have been a better choice for Samsung simply because they feel more natural in the hand. That said, the SPen is fantastic for writing. The nib provides just enough friction that it feels like you're pushing into the display, similar to how you push down on a piece of paper when you're writing. That tiny bit of extra friction helps it feel more like you're writing with a pen on thick, glossy paper than just sliding a bit of plastic around on a gloss surface. Writing with the SPen is fluid. There's no noticeable lag or latency issues. Movements are smooth and jitter-free whether you're doing long, curving brushstrokes or zigzagging across the screen. And because the nib is so thin, you can be really precise with your movements. You can also tilt the shade, which works really well, but it isn't available in every application. Palm rejection is excellent. You can have the tablet completely flat, with your hand resting on the screen like you would on a piece of paper, and it won't cause any problems when you're writing with the SPen. Most apps are clever enough to recognize that you're using a stylus and will not register touch input as ink, so you can use the SPen to write and use your fingers to scroll around the screen. That singular button on the SPen also has its own uses. Holding it down while drawing turns the SPen into an eraser. Pressing it once while hovering over the screen brings up Air Command or Windows Ink. When hovering with the SPen, you can also interact with drop-down menus and see things without clicking on them, similar to how a mouse works. Really, the only thing holding the SPen back is the operating system. Compared to iOS or even Android, Windows is just not optimized for touch. It doesn't really have any good gesture support like the iPad Pro, and most of its menus and buttons are just not big enough to use without a stylus. And even then, there are only a handful of apps that really make use of the SPen, including Adobe Photoshop, Microsoft Sudoku, Autodesk Sketchbook, the New York Times crossword app, which is fantastic by the way, Samsung Notes, and of course the latest Microsoft Office applications. Going back to the Air Command feature I mentioned earlier, you've got options for Samsung Notes, Screen Write, Smart Select, and Show Window. The best feature here is obviously Smart Select, which lets you do a bunch of different things. You can record snippets of what's on screen and convert that into an animated picture, or you can convert pictures to text and share that directly to whatever app you're using, or you can just copy it to the clipboard. I don't use the other features as much, so aside from Smart Select, Air Command isn't all that useful to me. I'm hoping Samsung updates it to include some more useful features like text translation, magnification, or contextual menus that change depending on what's on screen. Another issue I had with Air Command is that there's a noticeable delay between when you press a button and when the menu actually shows up. Fortunately, Samsung lets you enable Windows Ink instead, which is just a tiny bit quicker to respond to the button press. If you're not going to be using either one, you can also disable it completely. And disabling the menu isn't actually a bad idea. Once you do that, you can download an application called Radial Menu, which lets you customize what the SPen does. For example, you can map the SPen button to the right-click button instead, which can be a lot more useful than Air Command. Now we finally come to how this device performs on a day-to-day basis. For reference, my typical day involves working on long documents in Microsoft Word, having Skype, Adobe Reader, and Microsoft Outlook open, having close to 15 tabs open in Google Chrome at any given time, one of which is going to be streaming music to my Bluetooth headphones, having the screen brightness set to about 75%, doing some light Photoshop work, and occasionally accessing files on my phone, which is connected via the dongle I showed you earlier. For how I use the tablet, I think performance is solid. More importantly, it's consistently solid. Whether I'm working in Photoshop or browsing the web or switching between the multiple apps I have open, the tablet doesn't lag or stutter. Even after a year of use with very few reboots or full shutdowns, the tablet hasn't slowed down much. It actually boots up within seconds and it's ready to go the moment I'm logged in. However, one area where it has problems is, as I mentioned before, graphically intensive stuff. Now, it can handle editing 1080p video footage, but like I said before, the tablet heats up a lot and the fan freaks out. It really struggles with 4K video editing, and if you're looking to get this as a gaming device, you'd best look somewhere else. Although it can play games like Red Alert 2 really easily, I tried playing Assassin's Creed Origins on this and it just couldn't handle it. Even at the lowest quality setting, it was a miserable gaming experience. Battery life is a mixed bag because it fluctuates a lot. On some days I'll easily get around 6.5 hours, while on other days I'd be reaching for the charger after just 4. On average though, I'm getting around 5.5 hours per day before the battery drops to 10%. By default, Samsung enables a battery setting that only charges a battery up to 85% in a bid to extend battery life. If I turn that setting off and let it charge to 100%, I get just under 7 hours of daily usage, which isn't bad, but it's still nowhere near the advertised 11 hours. In either case, I think the Microsoft Surface and the iPad Pro offer longer battery lives. Having said that, both USB ports on this device support fast charging, which means you can get to 100% in under 3 hours. It drops down to 2 hours if you charge the tablet when it's completely turned off. And as I mentioned earlier, you can use portable power banks to charge this when you're on the go. So after all that, is the Galaxy Book 12 worth buying right now? Honestly, no. At least not at its current price, anyway. You see, on October 18th, Samsung announced the next version of the Galaxy Book, which is creatively called the Galaxy Book 2. A quick comparison between the two shows that the new version runs Windows 10S by default, meaning it only runs apps from the Windows Store unless you manually upgrade it to the full version of Windows. There's also only one model of the Galaxy Book 2 being released, which has a 12-inch display with a Snapdragon 850 processor, 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage. That means you can't get a smaller 10-inch model or one with more RAM or more storage. The Galaxy Book 2 features all the same ports as the original Galaxy Book, but the rear-facing camera has been pushed down to 8 megapixels instead of the current 13. Some cool new features include a kickstand design similar to the Microsoft Surface, a built-in fingerprint scanner for Windows Hello, a keyboard that magnetically attaches to the front of the tablet so you type at an angle instead of having the keyboard be completely flat, an allegedly 20-hour battery life for this always-on computer, speakers that are tuned by AKG, and gigabit-class LTE capability. The pictures also show that there's a new SPen for the Galaxy Book 2, and that there's no SPen holder on the keyboard this time round. So that means the SPen will magnetically attach to the side of the tablet, like with the Microsoft Surface. I've not had a chance to try out the new device, but I really like that Samsung has made a conscious effort to fix some of the shortcomings of the original Galaxy Book. But the main thing you should take away from all of this is that the current Galaxy Book should hopefully see a price drop, and when the price does go down, that would be the optimal time to buy this. Just keep in mind that the Galaxy Book 12 is now almost 2 years old, so it may not see continued support, especially now that the new model is being released. This could be a problem with third-party accessories like skins, screen protectors, and keyboard cases, but on the plus side you'll always be able to find decent styluses. The SPen that ships with the new Galaxy Book, for example, will absolutely work with this one. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that just because the new model is being released, doesn't mean that the old one is suddenly obsolete. The Galaxy Book 12 is still a fantastic device, and in many ways, I think it could be a better purchase than the soon-to-be released sequel. And that brings me to the end of the review. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found this video helpful. If you've got any comments, questions, or concerns, please let me know and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. This has been Zaeem Siddiqui from Zeus Reviews. Over and out.